Hi, my name is Jessica Mendoza, and I am a member of APTA Washington's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. And we are excited to bring you our next installment of Sharing Stories. Sharing Stories is a project launched by the DEI and B Committee to tell the stories of physical therapists in our community, how they showcase diversity, and invite people to listen, think, and act. And so we are very excited to welcome Angela Fritz to talk a little bit about her experience with disability and the physical therapy space. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored and excited to be a part of this amazing project. I've listened to some of the other Sharing Stories interviews that your group has done, and I think it's very powerful in moving our profession forward to a place of more inclusion and belonging.
Thank you. We're very excited to have you as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, as Jessica mentioned, my name is Angela Fritz. My pronouns are she and her, and my visual description is I am a white woman in my mid-30s. I have light brown hair pulled back into a bun. I don't know if you can see, I'm wearing blue hearing aids and a shirt that says choose to include, which is the topic of today's conversation. I am a pediatric physical therapist. I have been practicing for 10 years now. I graduated in 2014 from the University of Washington. Go Huskies. And I've been working in pediatrics ever since. I became a board certified pediatric physical therapist in 2017 and have really tailored the bulk of my career towards supporting infants and their families, specifically in the NICU and beyond. So I have worked at Seattle Children's Hospital for the past 5.5 years, and actually just recently made a very big life transition back to be closer to my family where I'm from, in Boise, Idaho, where I am helping to grow and promote the developmental presence in the NICU at St. Luke's Children's Hospital. I have been involved in lots of different aspects of the PT organization. I go to CSM every year. I have been an APTA Washington annual conference committee member for a very long time. And I love to be involved in our profession that I'm so passionate about. Another little just side thing about me is I have a little passion project that I call BBPT. That is a website, a social space, and really aimed to be a resource for families where I share a lot about infant development. And I also try to do a lot of advocacy work around disability and inclusion, and creating a brave, safe space for everybody within our social and professional communities.
That's awesome. And as a fellow pediatric PT, Husky grad, NICU therapist, I know our worlds have overlapped and intersected a lot through the years. And so it's just been really awesome for me to watch your projects grow and see your leadership in this space, and also just see this new emphasis on disability and ableism and inclusion and how important that is in our profession. So I think that's awesome. So I just mentioned the word ableism, and that's a word that's going to come up a lot in our conversation as we talk about disability and inclusion. So for those who may not be as familiar with the word, or have maybe heard it thrown around but really don't know what it means, how would you define ableism for people?
Ableism is very similar to other types of isms that we might be more familiar with in our society. So racism, sexism, those isms generally tend to portray the idea that based on a social or status group, that there are prejudices and discriminatory actions and behaviors and beliefs taken from the general population against that group. So ableism in particular is the idea that disability is a bad thing, that disabled people are less than, and that there are stereotypes and biases that the general population holds against people with disabilities. I would like to call out that there have been a lot of people who have been doing amazing work in this space, and in particular, SINS Invalid or Invalid. They are a Black disabled advocacy artists group that have done a lot of work in the disability justice space. And specifically, I'd like to highlight the definition of ableism that Talila Lewis and Dustin Gibson have laid out. And it's unique because it describes ableism not just as affecting folks with disabilities, but that this pervasive bias really impacts all of us. That by having such rigid exclusionary ideas of what is considered normal and what is considered acceptable in our society, it doesn't just exclude people with disabilities, it excludes all of us in one way or another. And they really highlight intersectionality and the roles that our differing identities play when it comes to ableism. And so I would encourage folks to check out the work that they've done. It's beautiful and powerful.
Great. Yeah, definitely. We'll be checking that out. And I love that emphasis on intersectionality because, we know that so many people are carrying different identities that can come with their own, exclusionary experiences and things like that. So thinking of the way those all work together or come together it can be pretty powerful. So tell us a little bit about your own story. I know you were showing off your hearing aids a second ago. So how has disability interacted or intersected with your own personal life experience?
Um, my experience with disability has been a journey for sure. I was born with sensory neural hearing loss bilaterally. It was a later diagnosis, so I didn't actually get my first pair of hearing aids until kindergarten. So I struggled with some um, being excluded, being left out, being left behind a bit in preschool and early years. My parents described that I was like missing things a lot in school. I remember getting reprimanded a lot by preschool teachers for not listening and, not paying attention when really I was doing my best. I just couldn't hear. And I finally got hearing aids when I was about to go into kindergarten, and they changed my life really in ways I never expected. I heard things I never knew I was missing. I was able to participate in different ways. And what I found was that despite how cool I thought my new hearing aids were, they were purple and sparkly, and they were giving me access to the world I had never had access to before. I realized quickly when I went into public school that they were not cool, that they were different, and that made me not cool. And I was the subject of a lot of bullying and a lot of excluding, as I'm sure many of us can relate to in our younger childhood years, for lots of different reasons. But this led me to have a very complicated and challenging journey with my own disability identity. I identify with the term internalized ableism very heavily, which is a term within the disability community that indicates that the disabled person, just like the word implies, internalizes the biases that society has placed on them and actually can result in some discrimination against themselves and their fellow disabled peers. And that's something I can certainly relate to. I was very ashamed of my hearing loss. I did not ever want to be called disabled. I would never wear my hair like this. I would always have it down so it would cover my hearing aids. I never wanted anybody to know about it. I would lie about it. It was a very hard aspect of my life for me to accept. And it really wasn't until my 20s that I really started to dive deeper into this and investigate a little bit more about where these harmful attitudes came from and how it impacts how I view myself. We talked about intersectionality and how our different identities connect. And this was an identity of mine that I had for so long forgotten about, and tried to like dismiss, but was and is such an important part of who I am. My experience with disability is what I accredit my career to. I have known what it's like to feel left out and to be different. I've known what it's like to not have access to the world that you dream of. And I have dedicated my career to helping to break down some of those barriers for the little babies that I work with, and using my voice and the many aspects of privilege that I carry with my intersectionality as a cis white person, to be able to amplify the message that disability is not a bad thing, that it is a very important aspect of diversity in our society, in our culture, in our circles, and in the profession of physical therapy. And it's something that we should be proud of and that we should be embracing. And what I've learned along this journey is that that's not something that we as disabled people can do alone. This is something that has to be a culture shift. We have to create a culture of belonging with all of us. I can't choose to belong, right? It has to be something that my peers and my coworkers and the people around me participate in. And that's the case with any marginalized identity, is that it takes allies and it takes everybody around us to create this culture of belonging. So when thinking about intersectionality and my role in the disability world, I do take an active role as an advocate to share my own story so that others can learn from it and that other little kids don't hopefully have to go through what I went through as a little kid. And with the areas of privilege, I try to use my privilege in order to act as an ally and an accomplice for other identities that I don't belong, that I don't identify with, but that I support and I want to encourage a culture of belonging with.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I think about my own journey, as an able-bodied woman, but who I've always felt really strongly to try to be an ally to the disability community. And hearing your story and the way that you can act as a model, an example for, especially I think in the pediatric world where we're encountering so many kids who are going to navigate lifelong disabilities and their families who are grieving and coming to terms with this aspect of their lives, to be able to have a positive role model who is right there, with them saying this, this isn't necessarily as bad as you think it might be, or, there's hope, whatever that looks like on the other side of this. And so I'm just thankful for you and the way that you have found your voice and the way that you're using it to bring people together around this topic and to be that positive example for the families that you work with. I think it's just awesome. So thank you for that. So you kind of touched on this a little bit in your conversation, but so your name has been appearing a lot. If people are kind of following conferences, both at the local level and the national level, different CE offerings that are out there, with courses that are, I think, very welcome and needed in the PT space around disability and ableism. So how did you make that leap going from kind of navigating your own experience of disability into more focused advocacy and justice work around this topic?
It's been a very interesting journey, one that I never expected, but one that I'm incredibly grateful for. As I mentioned, I spent most of my life trying to hide my disability. And so this new journey over probably the last 5 years or so, where I've been outspoken and I've been sharing about my secret disability on very public levels has been a big shift for me. And I always joke that if you would have told little 6-year-old Angela that she was going to be sharing and showing her hearing aids on public forums, I think she would have been quite surprised and horrified. But I also so strongly have realized how important that representation is. I've had a couple of really powerful moments of experiences where I have shared my story and it's made an important impact on care. A couple years ago, I was incredibly honored to win the Family Choice Award at Seattle Children's Hospital for exemplifying family-centered care. And if you read my nomination, which was the most beautiful thing that a family has or could probably ever say about the care that I gave their child in the NICU, the thing that they nominated me for, and the thing that was highlighted to them wasn't my phenomenal physical therapy skills. And it wasn't my beautiful handling, which I would love to think I have, and my, examination skills that I've honed over the past 10 years. The thing that really exemplified family-centered care and excellent care to them was when this mother found out that her baby was going to have profound hearing loss. And I shared with her my own experience with hearing loss and some of the challenges that I had encountered, but also the strength that came from that. And in her letter, this mom just highlights about how me sharing that with her in that very vulnerable moment shifted her perspective from feeling devastated about her child's disability to feeling hope and that she could still live a very fulfilling and wonderful life, even with her hearing loss. And I've had several experiences like this, and I know that others who provide important representation in our profession are doing the same thing for our patients and our community. And it's just so powerful. And the way that I originally got into this work was it actually came from a blog post that I wrote on the BBPT website that I mentioned earlier. It was really the first time that I had shared publicly about my experience with hearing loss. It was incredibly vulnerable. It was very nerve-wracking for me to share that. I remember, like, as I was writing the blog post, my fingers were shaking and I was very nervous about it. And the response was incredibly positive. I got such amazing feedback. I got such amazing support that I never expected to have. And it really helped to kind of heal a lot of that internalized ableism that I had carried from not having that response as a little kid, to help solidify this pride in my disabled identity. And it really launched this advocacy path that I've been lucky and honored to lead. When people who read that blog post, who had positions to recruit speakers, reached out to me and asked me to present in panels. I think the first thing that really happened was I was asked to speak on a panel with other disabled PTs at CSM, and this was during COVID, and it was virtual. So, it was a very unique experience, but it was so powerful because it was the first time in most of my life that I had met a peer professional with a disability. I think that disability is so underrepresented in our society, and it is for sure underrepresented within physical therapy. And that's something that these colleagues that I have been so privileged to be able to work with this work, and I are working so hard to change.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember reading that blog post that you posted, and I remember being surprised because, we have intersected or overlapped in like at conferences. We know colleagues and, friends in common. And, I remember reading that going, oh, I did not realize this was part of her story. So just, yeah, props to you for sharing that, and exciting to see how that launched this whole new aspect of your career and this work that you're doing. So you talked a little bit about intersectionality, especially kind of in regards to your position as a cisgender white woman, and how that has afforded you particular privilege in this space to be able to share and to advocate. How do you think that's also impacted how you navigate the world and your experiences with other people?
When I was little and I was in the hearing booth, getting my hearing test, I remember just like wishing so much that the doctors were wrong. I didn't have hearing loss. This was all a big mistake. I could ditch the hearing aids, and this was not a part of who I was. And I remember feeling that way very strongly through most of my life. And through a lot of different factors, including meeting other people who are very powerful, amazing individuals who embrace and are proud of their disabled identities, through working with so many kids who are navigating lifelong disabilities with bravery and with pride, through a lot of therapy and dismantling my own views of internalized ableism and my own feelings of unworthiness, I can tell you now that I would never change my disability status. I would never change this part of my story, despite how hard and tumultuous it might have been, because it has made me into a compassionate and understanding person that without this experience, I don't know who I would be. It has given me a heart for people who are excluded. It has given me a personal connection to others who are different. And it has shaped the way that I interact with the world in every situation, both professionally, personally, socially, and publicly. It has shaped every part of who I am for the better. And I will tell you that having many disabled friends, the disability community is the most inclusive and accepting community I've ever been a part of. You have different needs, doesn't matter. They accept you. You have different ways of moving about the world, doesn't matter. They'll move with you. I have just been so overwhelmed and learned so much from my fellow disabled colleagues and friends about what compassion and inclusion actually looks like and how I can practice that in all different areas of my life.
Great, thank you. So ableism, thinking about how we see it around us, are there any examples that you have encountered lately or that you feel are, either personal or that you feel are really pertinent or relevant right now?
We could talk about this all day. Have I have lots of experience personally. I have lots of experience, secondhand through friends and through patients that I work with about how ableism manifests. But what comes to mind is just last month I was honored to be included as a panelist in the first ever American Council of Academic Physical Therapy, Accessibility and Disability Inclusion Summit in Chicago at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. And it was a very powerful summit. It was a group of policymakers, program directors, professors, clinical advisors and support people. It was a group of people who are really kind of at the forefront of our profession, who are picking which students are going to be allowed into our PT programs and supporting those students through their PT program and helping them graduate and be launched into our profession. And this whole weekend was dedicated working with those people about how we can dismantle ableism with our own profession. And we heard from disabled students and the challenges that they've gone through with whether it's having trouble getting access to accommodations that they need for their disability, which I can relate to as well, whether it's stereotypes and biases that limit their ability to succeed and to thrive in their areas of study or areas of practice, whether it's our very exclusive and subjective and random technical standards across the nation about what abilities you need to have to even apply to physical therapy. Ableism is prevalent and present in every aspect of what we do. And similar to other isms that I have worked in and I have studied in, like racism and sexism, these attitudes and biases are pervasive. And whether you identify as ableist or racist or not, which none of us want to identify as that, we can either choose to act as ableist and continue to perpetuate these harmful biases, or we can actively resist them to be strong allies and advocates in any moment. And so I just encourage us as a PT profession to really keep that in mind, to think about, are your entrances accessible to your clinic or your place of practice? Do you have Braille and other sign language interpretation and other forms of communication available for your patient population? Do you use harmful, outdated terminology when talking about disability? And do your own internal biases influence the way that you speak to patients about their own disabilities? All of these aspects of ableism play a role in our profession and how we either choose to perpetuate these harmful practices that have been ingrained in us for so long within our profession, or how we stop them and stand up against them and change the culture to be one of more inclusion and belonging.
Yeah, that's so important. And, kind of leads into, I think you addressed this a little bit with that answer, but how do you see ableism really manifesting itself within the PT community? And I think, because I think especially with the work you're doing, I love that it's not just focused on like, let's educate the wider community about ableism, which of course is very important just from a personal and a policy standpoint, but you're directing a lot of your attention to looking inward at our own profession and how we see ableism manifested, whether, it's structurally or in education. As somebody who is well trained in the medical model of disability, right? It's been a huge shift for me too, to kind of unlearn some of that and relearn looking more from a social aspect and listening to the voices of disabled people and their experience. So how do you really see that being present in both the PT and kind of medical community? And what do we as PT professionals need to start doing to break some of that down and address it.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the medical versus social models of disability, and I'd like to talk on those a little bit because I think that is that's a good place for us to start. In a lot of the healthcare professions and medical professions in general, we are taught this medical model of disability, which is that disability is a bad thing. It is something that we need to fix. It is a problem with the person, and it is our job as the professionals to fix that person so that they can live a happy life. And that's what a lot of us were taught, whether explicitly or implicitly, throughout our physical therapy education. It's what our profession was largely built on. It's largely believed within our professional community. And the social model of disability is really what disability advocates and allies are really pushing for the narrative to shift to. And the social model indicates that disability is a normal and healthy part of diversity in our societies. And it is not a problem with the individual that needs to be fixed. It's a problem with society, that if somebody can't access their world, it's not their fault, it's our society's fault. And that it is up to all of us to create an inclusive and accepting society that allows people with disabilities and non-disabled people alike to interact and to engage in the world and the spaces in which they believe that they want to belong in. And you know, it goes even further recently with not just like acceptance, but with disability pride. And I think that's something that the physical therapy profession is still very far behind in. As I mentioned, I work in the NICU, and I am there during a lot of vulnerable and potentially life-altering situations where parents are getting news about their infant that is going to change the way that they thought their baby's life and their life was going to go. And I think that those moments are so critical in how we continue to perpetuate ableism. What I often see with a new diagnosis, for example, I can think of, you know, this very poignant time where I saw two babies that were given postnatal diagnoses of Down syndrome or trisomy 21. So the mom and the parents did not know beforehand that their baby had Down syndrome, and that was news that the doctor was giving them. And I can think of one example that just made my heart sink. So the doctor came in and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to tell you this. We got the genetic results back, and unfortunately, your baby has Down syndrome." And you can just see the way that the whole room just kind of like collapsed, and it was sad, and it was down, and it was negative. And it just broke my heart, because if you know anybody with Down syndrome, if you've ever worked with anybody with Down syndrome, it is a beautiful, wonderful, powerful life to live. And they contribute immensely to our society and to our communities and to our cultures. And in contrast, I was there for another very similar experience where a family was getting a postnatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. And the doctor came in and they said, "Hello, congratulations on your baby. We've got the results back from some further testing, and what we found is that your baby has trisomy 21 or Down syndrome, which is a genetic difference that results in some differences in which your child might experience. Here's some resources that we have for you in the community that we can help you get plugged into to learn more about what this might look like for your child and how to best support them." And just the same information is being delivered, but the way that it's being delivered is just so different between those two interactions. And if you think about being the parents of the first experience and what message is being shared to you about your child in that very vulnerable moment, and how that might impact you and how you perceive your child's disability, compared to the second example, it's just, our language is so powerful, and the messages that we share are so powerful. And we as physical therapists we might not be giving these diagnoses, but we might be diagnosing a life-changing injury. We might be supporting people during a shift from a non-disabled identity to a disabled identity. We might be, as pediatric PTs, supporting people as they kind of navigate what this new diagnosis is going to mean for them. And the words that we use and the attitudes that we portray either explicitly or implicitly through our body language and our messaging, they play a really big role on the care that we provide patients and the messages that we're perpetuating within our profession and within our communities. And I think that we need to be taught more of a social model of disability in our schooling so that we can believe that disability is a strength. I can sit here and I can tell you this all day until I'm blue in the face, but until you believe it and until you internalize it and until you then share that message with the people around you, we're not going to be successful in dismantling the ableism that pervades our profession. And so I think there are actionable steps that we can take for inclusion. For me, that looks like ensuring that closed captioning is available for me on Zoom meetings, which was for this meeting, which I very much appreciate. For others, it looks like different types of accessibility, but it also looks like changing our attitudes and our beliefs and our culture. So we have a lot of work to do as a physical therapy profession, but luckily, as I have alluded to, there are so many powerful disabled PTs within our community that are speaking up, that are sharing their stories, that are breaking down these ableist barriers just by being who they are and teaching others about who they are. And I feel very excited about the direction of our profession, with the way that our commitment to not only disability justice, but to all of the DE, I, and B efforts that our profession is recently committing to. Yes, it's been a long time coming and we have a long way to go, but I feel excited and encouraged about the direction that we are intentionally as a profession choosing to move towards.
Yeah, I would echo that. I'm so excited to see, I feel like in the last couple of years, really, like every conference, national conference that I'm seeing, there are sessions that are talking about disability justice, that are talking about inclusion, that are talking about the PT space and how that's manifesting. I know I got a chance to hear your panel in Boston at CSM this year, with some other disabled PTs, and it's exciting to me that like this is really present and we're having more and more of these conversations. And I think you're right, we have a long way to go, but it makes me hopeful that we're on the right path, that we're at least starting to talk about these things and putting them out there in the open. Voices like yours that are out there and just shouting to the wind and making people really aware of these issues. So thank you. And thank you for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation, about, disability and ableism and inclusion and the work that you're doing. Is there anything any last things you would want to add, that you would really want our PT community and specifically our APTA Washington community to know?
There's so much, but some summary points that I would like to just highlight is that this is hard work. I have talked to you about my own internalized ableism, and even with a disability, I am constantly learning. I am learning from other folks with disabilities that are different than mine. I make mistakes all the time, just like we all do and we all will. And that's okay. And we're all learning together. And as long as you are listening to the group that is impacted, so listen to folks with disabilities. A very common mantra that you'll hear within disability justice is nothing about us without us. Listen to disabled voices and disabled stories. I am so grateful to APTA Washington for doing this and allowing me to share my experience and my story. And just be open and just be curious to changing the way that you think and to challenging some of these biases that are held deeply within you. I love the quote from Maya Angelou that says, "Do the best that you can do until you know better, and when you know better, do better." And I think that's a good mantra for us all to internalize and to learn, to accept and to live by, because there's always going to be things to learn. But what I can tell you is that disability is not a bad word. Disability is a strength. It is a very powerful part of diversity. Disabled people are creative and talented and resourceful and fun, and we are here in our communities and we have a lot to provide and a lot to share. So include us, hire people with disabilities, consult people with disabilities, listen to our stories and then implement what we say in your practice and in your ways of thinking. And I think that, we're all in this together. We have a lot of work to do, but it's work that we are slowly starting to chip away with. And I'm very grateful to all of the allies and fellow disabled people that I've had the pleasure of working with over the years, who are using their voices and their platforms to continue to speak up for inclusion. Because it's the backbone of everything that we do, and it's imperative to the success and the health of our profession as we move forward.
Awesome. And I don't know when this will actually be officially published, but I love that we're recording this during Disability Pride Month. It just seems like it is perfect for that. So thank you again, Angela, for your time and for your just very real and honest sharing. This was wonderful. And we hope that all of you that are listening enjoyed this latest edition of Sharing Stories. If you haven't, I encourage you to on YouTube or through the ABTA Washington website, look up some of our previous sessions that we've done. And we look forward to sharing more physical therapy stories in the DEI and V space in the future. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.